Ministry of Industry and Trade urges USA to carefully consider restrictions on steel imports. And later on, Vietnam and Sweden promote environment-friendly economy. Hello there, you're tuning into another edition of BizLine. I'm Hoàng Hằng, and now let's take a look at some economic news making headlines over the past week. State President Trần Đại Quang reiterated his wish for more economic cooperation with Bangladesh during his visit earlier this week to the South Asian nation. Here he hosted a reception for a delegation from the Bangladesh-Vietnam Council for Commerce and Industries. The state president hopes that both countries will continue to work together in fields of mutual strength, such as garment, textile, footwear and agriculture. He also suggested that the Bangladesh-Vietnam Council for Commerce and Industries work with airlines and consider starting direct flights between the two nations. Multiple memoranda of understanding were signed between the two countries to promote bilateral cooperation in fisheries and livestock, industry and cultural exchange. The Ministry of Industry and Trade has urged the U.S. to carefully consider alternative means to restrict the imports of steel and aluminium products from Vietnam. The proposal was made after the U.S. said it would impose fixed tariffs on all aluminium and steel imports, including from Vietnam. Punitive tariffs have already been recommended to the country's President Donald Trump. The U.S. President needs to decide on the steel recommendations by April the 11th and on the aluminium recommendation by April the 19th. The Ministry of Industry and Trade said it would monitor the progress of the case and all options are on the table when it comes to ensuring the justifiable rights and interests of Vietnamese businesses. According to the latest report by the Department of Foreign Investment, the finance and banking and insurance industry in Vietnam has attracted $1.45 billion from foreign investors in the first 2 months of this year. This is an increase of 70 times compared to about $20 billion in the same period last year. M&A deals have also brought in strong investment. In January, the State Bank of Vietnam approved the transfer of all of Techcombank's contributed capital to Lotte Card of Lotte Korea. A subsidiary of Shinhan Group also paid $151 million to acquire Prudential Vietnam. Analysts forecast that the stock market is going to be the most attractive investment channel for investors this year. Up to $291 million would pour into Vietnamese startups last year, a year-on-year increase of 42%, according to a recent report by Topica Founder Institute, or TFI. 92 startups received investment last year, almost a double from 2016. Domestic investors accounted for 64 deals, while foreign investors made 28. Among investors, 500 startups led in successful investment deals with 11 acquisitions, followed by ESP Capital, a new homegrown venture capital firm. American e-commerce giant Amazon is set to join Vietnam's fast-growing market this month by opening up its platforms to local small and medium enterprises. Its development strategy will be revealed at the Vietnam Online Business Forum, which will be held first in Hanoi and then move to Ho Chi Minh City on March the 16th. Vietnam's e-commerce market grew by 25% last year and is expected to maintain its growth in the next 3 years. Revenue from online retail is forecast to hit $10 billion by 2020, accounting for 5% of the country's retail market. Forbes magazine's list this year will see the debut appearance of 2 other Vietnamese, Trần Bá Dương, chairman of Thượng Hải Auto Corporation or THACO, and Trần Đình Long, chairman of Hòa Phát Corporation. Also, Phạm Nhật Vượng, owner of the real estate Vingroup and Vietnam's first billionaire, enjoyed his 6th consecutive appearance on the list. CEO of budget carrier Vietjet Air Nguyễn Thị Phương Thảo also had her 2nd appearance on the list as the 766th richest person in the world. Topping the Forbes list this year was Amazon founder Jeff Bezos, while Bill Gates, last year's richest person, dropped to second place. Up next in our Crosstalk, Vietnam will see what Sweden has to share about their experience in building an environment-friendly economy. Now, according to a report of the International Monetary Fund in 2017, rapid industrialization in Vietnam since the 1990s has led to impressive growth and poverty reduction. But growth has relied on intensive and unsustainable exploitation of mining and other natural resources. Solutions for using and managing natural resources more sustainably were discussed at the recently hosted Vietnam International Water Week, which took place in Hanoi on March the 5th. The event enjoyed the participation of a delegation from Sweden, one of the countries in the world who successfully harmonized growth with environment and climate actions. On this occasion, let's see what Vietnam can learn from Sweden in pursuing green growth in this episode of BizLine.
It has been nearly 6 years since the implementation of the National Green Growth Strategy. Vietnam has achieved certain results in green growth objectives, applying solar energy in agricultural production, using biotech for on-site wastewater treatment, alternative building materials. Vietnam has never seen such a boom in the use of environmentally friendly technologies in businesses.
Năm 2012, Thủ tướng Chính phủ ban hành chiến lược quốc gia về tăng trưởng xanh. Các đánh giá đã cho thấy Việt Nam đã thu được kết quả ban đầu rất đáng khích lệ và nòng cốt trong đó là sự tham gia của khối tư nhân từ các dự án về năng lượng tái tạo, điện gió, điện mặt trời, hay là các dự án trong ngành nông nghiệp như là lĩnh vực trồng rừng, bảo vệ phát triển rừng, rồi các dự án liên quan đến nông nghiệp hữu cơ để cung cấp các cái sản phẩm sạch cho người tiêu dùng.
As for Sweden, the country in 1995 has become one of the first countries that imposed tax on carbon. The policy proved effective and became a cheap tool to reduce carbon dioxide. In 2012, environmental tax of Sweden contributed to 2.52% of GDP, compared to the average of OECD countries at 1.54%.
It is possible to reduce greenhouse gases at the same time as you increase growth. One curve goes up and the other one goes down. My goal is to secure that Sweden manage this great transformation that we have already started to become a fossil-free country.
We have invited to our studio today Mr. La Rones, Ambassador for Climate Change for the Swedish Ministry of Environment and Energy, and Dr. Jakob Granet, Director General of Swedish Agency for Marine and Water Management. Well, thank you so much for our guests.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, if I may, Dr. Granet, adaptation to climate change is a factor that has become increasingly important for economic development in countries around the world, including Vietnam. So what do you think about the link between climate action and economic growth?
Well, economic growth is necessary, but of course we also see the impacts of growth. We see the change in climate because of the release of climate gases, and we see how those gases are changing, heating temperature of the earth, and also how carbon dioxide are being taken up by the ocean, leading to ocean acidification, and also how the heating of the sea surface is also changing the sea level rise, threatening our systems, our cities, and also how that lead to changes in weather and patterns and storms and storm surges. So of course we see those connections. So what we need to do somehow is to decouple our economic growth model from impact on climate change.
Okay. Would you like to weigh in on that?
Well, perhaps even more importantly is that we see acting in a climate smart manner, moving into a climate smart economy brings opportunities. This is the next stage after agriculture, industry, IT, technology. There are lots of opportunities in investing climate smart. And there are even studies showing that if you invest climate smart, you actually generate better growth.
Now, many businesses in Vietnam have aimed for Sustainable Development Goals, which is SDGs as we know it, in their operation. So what is the role of SDGs in developing an environment-friendly economy for the nation?
I think you can't divide the two. Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement, the climate issue, they come together. We are talking about developing our societies, but in a sustained manner, which keeps it within the planetary boundaries, which leaves it also a good society for the next generation. So there are lots of business opportunities here, and we see innovation as an important part of it, and it's to a large extent business driven.
What about the role of SDGs for development in your opinion?
Well, I think they're critically important because they have set a common agreement on what we want to achieve across the line from social, economic to environmental issues. So it relates as much to Sweden as it does to Vietnam and other parts of the world. The challenge we see perhaps is that many of them are quite broad, and we need to see how to connect the different SDGs in a more straightforward manner so that they can be easier implemented. For example, in the case of how we work in Sweden on the water issues, there are goals related to fresh water on goal number 6, there are issues related to ocean, sustainable oceans, goal number 14. So we try to see these connections. So how does the work we do on land impact the situation at sea? So these are the type of connections we need to look at in other affairs as well, related to the SDGs.
On September the 25th, 2015, 193 UN member countries adopted a set of goals to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure prosperity for the people. Though the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, are directly attached to governments, many enterprises have realized their interest in SDGs in the past 2.5 years.
Những nhãn hàng của chúng tôi mà thực hiện cái chiến lược phát triển bền vững thì bao giờ cũng có sự tăng trưởng tốt hơn và nhanh hơn so với những cái phần còn lại của doanh nghiệp, bởi vì người tiêu dùng bao giờ họ cũng lựa chọn những cái thương hiệu, những cái nhãn hàng, những cái sản phẩm của những doanh nghiệp mà cùng chung tay với cộng đồng, cùng chung tay với chính phủ giải quyết những cái thách thức về mặt phát triển.
Also, in the approach of SDGs, Coca-Cola Vietnam initiated the first eco center in Asia in 2015. This local market, in the shape of a container, offers water and electricity in Ho Chi Minh City.
Cái sản phẩm của chúng tôi là cái sản phẩm có thể nói là 50% là từ nước. Một giọt nước chúng tôi sử dụng của địa phương để mà thực hiện, để mà sản xuất cái sản phẩm chúng tôi, thì chúng tôi cũng trả lại cho cộng đồng địa phương ở nơi mà chúng tôi có cái hoạt động kinh doanh cái lượng nước tương tự.
According to delegates at the Vietnam Corporate Sustainability Forum 2017, not only big firms but SMEs can benefit from contributing to the implementation of SDGs.
Phát triển bền vững không phải là phú quý sinh lễ nghĩa. Nếu một cái doanh nghiệp mà không phát triển bền vững thì rất khó tiếp cận thị trường của khách hàng. Các cái doanh nghiệp nhỏ và vừa nhưng mà phát triển bền vững thì sẽ có thể tiếp cận được nhà đầu tư, có thể mời gọi được nhà đầu tư và có thể thâm nhập được các thị trường.
According to the report of Business and Sustainable Development Commission, the achievement of SDGs will create a business market valued at $12,000 billion each year and 380 million jobs towards 2030. This is an incentive for enterprises to join the mission of sustainable development in the coming time.
Now, I would like to ask Ambassador Raunes, more than half of Sweden's national energy supply come from renewables, which is an environment-friendly industry. So do you think this approach can be an emerging business for Vietnam in the coming time?
Well, that is for Vietnam to decide, and it's for your national policies to decide, of course. But I think if you look globally, what's happening, you see a real shift in the global supply of energy now. And the world is now moving to low carbon efficient use of renewable energy. So last year you saw globally that 2/3 of all new investment in the world was renewable energy. And it's market driven. It's driven because prices are coming down. and if you would add the social cost, it would be even cheaper now. So I think solar energy, wind, it's the future and it's coming. And you can see that some international banks are now saying we will not put our money into fossil energy. And you have large insurance companies saying we will not insure coal because that's no future there.
There have been a lot of coverage about the possibility of turning waste into energy in Vietnam, and also making use of garbage is also a good business in Sweden, I believe. So could you explain this move and why is it such an interesting and profitable development?
I think basically because we look at waste not as waste, but as something that has been used but can be used again. We have turned waste into energy, meaning that we have become almost independent of oil. But for that you need, to make it effective, you need both regulations that you can't do anything with waste, like shops selling bottles, plastic bottles. They are obliged in Sweden to take it back if you bring it back to them. But you also need incentives, staying with the plastic bottles. If you bring it back to the shop, you get something money back for it now. So you need to have both incentives and regulations. And then I think you need public awareness.
According to experts, Vietnam has lots of advantages when it comes to developing renewable energy. The country has a coastline of nearly 3,400 kilometers, the potential for 500 to 1,000 kilowatt-hours per square kilometer of wind power per year, and average solar radiation of 5 kilowatt-hours per square kilometer per day. The potential for hydropower is over 4,000 megawatts a year. It also has potentially an estimated 73 million tons of biomass a year, allowing generation of 5,000 megawatts. Apart from these, the country also has another fossil fuel-free source to produce energy: waste. Vietnam can learn a lot from Sweden, where waste is a common source of energy.
Swedes produce a fair amount of waste, approximately 460 kilos per person and year, which amounts to 4.4 million tons every year. Less than 1% goes to landfill, and the rest is about 50-50 recycled and energy recovery.
3 tons of waste contains as much energy as 1 ton of fuel oil. So there's a lot of energy in waste.
The process of generating energy from waste in Sweden even complies with its national standards on emissions.
All incineration of waste must be done in a proper manner. We are at half of the levels that are actually permitted, so we are far below the emission levels that the authorities has demanded from us.
In Vietnam, the first ever waste incineration plant opened in Sóc Sơn, Hanoi at the beginning of 2017. It can process 75 tons of waste a day, and its emissions comply with regulated standards.
Dự án đầu tiên của Hà Nội phát điện lên lưới và đã hòa được lên lưới quốc gia và ký được hợp đồng mua bán điện với EVN và đã phát điện rất ổn định. Tuy nhiên thì những dự án như thế này cần phải có sự quan tâm, kể cả cái giá đối với xử lý rác và điện rác thì cũng cần phải nâng lên để giảm bớt cái chi phí mà các doanh nghiệp phải trả cho cái công việc thu gom xử lý rác đi.
Sweden hopes to work with Vietnamese businesses for producing energy from waste. This was reiterated at a trade promotion meeting between Swedish businesses and the Hanoi Young Business Association last year. This is another step for both countries in their sustainable and environment-friendly economic approach.
The agroforestry and fisheries sector contributed 15.34% to GDP of Vietnam in 2017. But that sector is also most vulnerable to environmental conditions. So what do you think Vietnam should do to ensure the development of the agroforestry and fisheries sector?
That's a quite large question because it relates to agriculture and forestry and fisheries management. But at the heart of this is, of course, to ensure that the water resources which are well maintained, and that we understand how we develop these resources. Agriculture, for example, in this country as well as in our country, depend quite a lot of fertilizers and pesticides, and these patterns of use impacts the subsequent water and food resources. So we need to be better at understanding what we enter into the system, how we use the resource, and how we monitor their development. And that's not easy. We are all struggling with understanding the way we utilize natural resources for our needs. And it is a challenge. And partly why we are also here visiting Vietnam is that we want to learn together on how we can do that much more effectively.
Now, Ambassador Ronnes, the Vietnam International Water Week recently took place in Hanoi. How will events like this help the government and business move toward an environment-friendly economy, in your opinion?
Well, we came to this International Water Week here in Vietnam to get inspiration and to make contacts and to see whether there are ways of collaborating now. So I think these meetings, they serve a very important role as conveners, as bringing people together, and of sharing experiences. So in that sense, I think you are having and you are taking a very good initiative in holding this week. We also have our week, the Stockholm International Water Week, and I know it attracts a lot of people and expertise now.
Would you like to add to that, Dr. Granite?
Yeah, what's been very important this week, I think, is for us to learn, and Vietnam has been very open and frank with its water resources problems. So, for example, there's been very good discussions and explanations of the threats that we see in the Mekong Delta, with sea salt intrusions, with problems with the capacity to adapt to climate change and flooding issues. So one example of issues that have been discussed is how can you use the natural landscape, can you use green infrastructure instead of building new dikes? Can you actually allow the land to be flooded during certain periods? Can you introduce new crops, new rice crops that are floating? So I think it's a very good example of how Vietnam is now exploring potentially how you can utilize the landscape for good economic development, smarter agriculture products, but also adapt for climate change in the same manner. And that type of knowledge and learning experience is something that we also have to learn in Sweden.
The recently held Vietnam International Water Week presented solutions for the use of natural resources in agriculture in a clean and sustainable manner. It was attended by Swedish experts in climate change and natural resources management.
We also talked about how do we manage the whole ecosystem of the river itself to make sure that we have reduction of any sort of pollutants from the source, whether that's at industry, whether it's from agriculture. Our own organisation in the Stockholm Environment Institute, we are already collaborating with MUNRE and with various different institutions to help develop scenario planning and help develop various options moving forward.
The project, implemented jointly by the Stockholm Environment Institute and Cần Thơ University, researches water management so that it meets the demand of agriculture and manufacturing without having a negative impact on the ecosystem.
Theo cái bản thân tôi thì tôi thấy rằng đối với cái dự án này, sau khi cái quá trình tham gia thì có thứ nhất là nó hỗ trợ cho cái vấn đề là giúp cho đào tạo của trường đại học Cần Thơ về lĩnh vực quản lý nước trong cái điều kiện biến đổi khí hậu, và đồng thời cũng có thể sử dụng các mô hình để mình sử dụng cho các cái tỉnh khác, cái đồng bằng sông Cửu Long cái chịu tác động của biến đổi khí hậu. Thì đây là những cái bài học có thể học được từ cái dự án.
The Vietnam International Water Week also discussed a number of soil and water management solutions in dealing with agricultural issues, including droughts and salinity.
In the Netherlands, we also have, of course, problems with salinity, and we are currently working on a project in Ben Tre and Chai Vinh provinces. We will combine the existing, the daily measurements of the salinity with a model for water movement, so that you can predict how the salinity will become in the next 2, 3, 4 or 5 days. And I think that is not being done before in Vietnam.
For the National Center for Water Quality Research of Heidelberg University in the U.S. state of Ohio, soil and water management also reduces the effects of agriculture to soil quality.
In our case in Ohio, we focused on agricultural production because that's the main cause of pollution. Agricultural production contributes more than 80% of phosphorus to the lake, actually, that causes the harmful blooms actually in our lake. So I guess that's also the case here in Vietnam.
Đây là những cái giải pháp mà phải nói là ở những cái quốc gia có một cái nền khoa học kỹ thuật tiên tiến và đặc biệt thì họ rất có kinh nghiệm trong việc quản lý, khai thác, sử dụng hiệu quả bền vững tài nguyên nước ở quốc gia. Và những công nghệ này cũng đã được đem chia sẻ cho các nước đang phát triển và trong các cái khu vực, đặc biệt trong đó có khu vực châu Á.
Now, Dr. Granit, Sweden is pursuing a blue economy, as I believe. So can you share a little bit more about this model and what needs to be achieved in this model?
Mm-hmm. Well, we are seeing the blue economy as a complement to maybe a green economy, which is resource efficient. And as I mentioned, we see also quite rapid development of the maritime technologies. That could be wind farms, that could be the way we utilize seabed mining and so forth. We need to create a governance and management system for that, so that we do it in a sustainable manner, so that we maintain the ecosystem integrity and reap the benefits of these development issues. The way to do that we are taking now forward is to do joint planning. So we plan between different sector ministries, that could be on transport and navigation and defense and so forth, and we include the civil society in that and the private business, so that we can together see what type of development can happen where, what type of development needs to be supported through government approaches, and what type of legislation do you need. So the planning model in the blue economy, I would argue, is emerging. It needs a lot of innovation moving forward.
Now the final question, Ambassador Rones, what are the ongoing and future cooperation programs between Vietnam and Sweden on environment-friendly economy do you think that can take place?
We are now moving into a more equal partnership. And we have it in terms of government cooperation. Dr. Granit represents the Agency for Marine and Water Management, so we have been discussing how can we collaborate on these areas. I think we have it on business. We have the major Swedish business community here, and I would say that they are, by and large, very green business, because they want to be at the cutting edge. They know to be competitive, they need to have the new solutions. Also on the political side, because we have such a good friendship between our countries, we need to have a political dialogue, how we can strengthen the multilateral system, how we can work together when it comes to the implementation of the Paris Agreement and the Sdgs globally. So I think on all these three areas we can work together and it would reinforce each other.
Okay. Would you like to add something to that, Dr. Granit, about what future cooperation program can Vietnam and Sweden work on in terms of environment-friendly economy?
Mm-hmm. Well, of course I agree with the Ambassador Ronos said, but I see also the very strong equal mindset here to find out new forms of technology and development patterns that are sustainable, that are, that do not destroy our environment, that maintain health, restore ecosystems, and you are in that space and we are in that too. So there are a number of areas in which we can collaborate, and part of our interest to come here is of course to see what could that be. And so we explored the topics of marine spatial planning, for example, as a prerequisite then for looking into navigation, smarter use of information technology and other sources. So I think we see a lot of opportunities here, building on the long history and tradition, and with a shared ambition, same goals of transforming our economies to low carbon and more sustainable.
Well, thank you to both of our guests for being here with us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sweden now has the highest proportion of renewable energy in Europe at 52%, and according to Swedish Energy Agency, it can be raised to 55% in just 2 years from now. This is just one of the success stories in Sweden's blue economy approach. With the same spirit, Vietnam approved its national green growth strategy in 2012, aiming to tackle environmental issues and achieve a low-carbon economy and protecting natural capital. There are a lot of work to do along this process. However, the determination of the government, businesses, and recent efforts and experience and support from countries such as Sweden give us a reason to believe that the target will be fulfilled soon. BizLine will continue to follow that approach. As for now, that wraps up this edition of BizLine. Thank you so much for being here with us. You can also log on to vtv4.vn or our YouTube channel at vtv4go for more of our programs and updates. Thanks for tuning in and goodbye for now.